The Galactic Bar and Grill wasn't the kind of establishment you found by accident. Tucked away in the grimy underbelly of Station Omega-7, it catered to the galaxy's toughest customers. The kind of beings who ate nails for breakfast and used black holes as swimming pools. Well, metaphorically speaking. Most species weren't actually that stupid. Behind the scarred metal bar stood Gorks, a four-armed Krellian whose purple skin bore the scars of 1,000 bar fights. His multiple hands moved with practiced efficiency, polishing glasses that had seen more violence than a gladiator arena. The walls were decorated with photographs of previous customers, though calling them decorations was generous. They were more like warning labels. Drink responsibly, read one sign, or become a cautionary tale. The bar's crown jewel sat in a reinforced display case behind Gorks, a single bottle of Molten Death, the galaxy's most notorious beverage. The liquid inside glowed with an ominous orange light that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. 3 separate warning labels covered the bottle in 17 different languages, all saying variations of "will definitely kill you." The drink had legendary status across known space. It was rumored to be distilled from the tears of dying stars and aged in the core of volcanic planets. The warrior clans of Brutus Prime used it in their most sacred rituals. The death rate was 97%. But hey, traditions were traditions. Into this den of galactic tough guys walked Captain Jake Murphy, looking about as out of place as a daisy in a minefield. He wore standard cargo hauler coveralls, his hair was slightly messed up from his helmet, and he had the kind of tired expression that came from 3 days of hyperspace travel with a busted environmental recycler. Jake glanced around the bar with mild curiosity. The other patrons looked like they'd stepped out of a horror movie catalog. There was a 10-foot-tall crustacean thing with claws that could cut through steel, a blob of sentient acid that was somehow wearing a leather jacket, and something that looked like a cross between a shark and a very angry porcupine. "Charming place," Jake muttered, settling onto a bar stool that creaked ominously under his very human weight. Gorks's 4 eyes focused on the newcomer with the kind of expression usually reserved for lost puppies wandering into traffic. Here was clearly someone who had made a very serious navigational error. "Listen, friend," Gorks said, his voice carrying the gravelly tone of someone who'd been shouting over bar fights for decades, "I think maybe you want the tourist sector. This establishment caters to a more experienced clientele." Jake looked around again, noting the collection of beings that could probably bench press a small moon. "Yeah, I can see that. But I'm not looking for trouble. Just want a drink after a long haul." Gorks's expression softened with something approaching paternal concern. In his 300 years of bartending, he'd developed a sixth sense about these things. This human was going to get himself killed, and Gorks would have to clean up the mess. "Tell you what," Gorks said, reaching for a bottle of what looked like carbonated water, "how about I start you with something mild? This is Gentle Breeze, imported from the peaceful gardens of Tranquilia Prime. It's got just enough kick to—" "Actually," Jake interrupted, squinting at the menu board, "could I get something cold? It's been hot as hell in my cargo hold, and the cooling system's been acting up." The bar went dead silent. Even the ambient music seemed to pause in terror. From a corner booth, a 7-foot-tall Zentari warrior named Vex slowly turned his scarred head toward Jake. Vex had survived the blood wars of Kepler 9 and bore ritual scars from 17 different death matches. His voice carried the weight of impending doom. Did he just ask for something cold? Commander Blurp, a gelatinous sludgerian whose translucent blue body rippled with nervous energy, oozed closer to the bar. "Surely he doesn't mean—" Blurp's voice trailed off in horror. At a table near the back, Razorwing Keat, an Avarian pilot whose feathers were decorated with the teeth of her enemies, spread her wings in alarm. "Someone needs to stop this madness before it's too late." Gorks's 4 hands began trembling. "Friend, when you say cold, you don't mean—" He gestured helplessly toward the display case containing Molten Death. Jake followed his gaze and shrugged. I mean, if that's what you've got. I'm not picky. The collective gasp from the other patrons was audible. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the floor like the hopes and dreams of anyone who thought this was going to end well. No, 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 Vex said, standing up to his full, intimidating height. Human, you don't understand. That drink has ended civilizations. The warrior King Brutax the Destroyer took one sip and spent 3 days in intensive care. The entire diplomatic corps of Rigel 7 tried to drink it as a peace offering, and we're still finding pieces of them in orbit. Jake looked confused. It's just a drink, right? How bad could it be? Commander Blurp rippled with anxiety. Last month, a drop of that substance accidentally fell on the floor. We had to evacuate the station and call in a hazmat team. The floor is still glowing. Plus added razor wing kit, the insurance premiums alone. Jake looked from one concerned alien face to another, his confusion growing. Look, I appreciate the warning, but I've been hauling cargo for 15 years. I've had truck stop coffee that could strip paint. How dangerous can one little drink be? Gorks made a sound that might have been sobbing. What followed was a ceremony that would have made ancient religious rituals look casual. Gorks donned protective gear that included a full hazmat suit, reinforced gloves, and what appeared to be a blast shield. The other patrons evacuated to what they optimistically called a safe distance, which in this case meant hiding behind overturned tables and placing nervous bets on Jake's survival time. Current odds are 30 seconds, announced someone from behind a reinforced pillar. I've got 20 credits on 15 seconds, called out another voice. You're all optimists, muttered Vex. I'm betting on instant vaporization. Gorks carefully, reverently, opened the display case. The bottle of Molten Death pulsed brighter, as if sensing an impending victim. Using specialized tongs, he extracted exactly 1 ounce of the glowing liquid and poured it into a glass that had been specially treated to withstand temperatures approaching those found in stellar cores. The liquid hissed and bubbled in the glass, giving off vapors that made the air shimmer with heat distortion. Small sparks of what looked like actual lightning danced across the surface. Last chance to reconsider, Gorks pleaded from behind his protective equipment. Jake reached for the glass, and several patrons whimpered. The liquid was so hot it was making the glass glow. Jake lifted it to his lips, paused, and took a careful sip. Then he frowned. This is way too warm, he said, looking disappointed. Do you have any ice cubes? The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments after nuclear detonations. Somewhere in the distance, a piece of equipment beeped forlornly. Gorks's forehands froze in mid-motion. Ice? Cubes? Yeah, you know, frozen water? This stuff would be pretty decent if it was colder. Jake took another sip and made a considering face. Actually, it tastes kind of like my ex-girlfriend's cooking, but spicier. She used to make this chili that could melt dental work. Vex's massive frame swayed slightly. He's still conscious. Commander Blurp had gone completely transparent, a sure sign of extreme shock among Sludgerians. This is impossible. The laws of physics are more like suggestions, apparently. Jake finished the drink in 3 casual gulps and set the glass down with a satisfied sigh. Not bad, though I've got to say, for all the build-up I was expecting something stronger. This is maybe a 6 out of 10 on the heat scale. Now, if you really want to see dangerous, you should try the ghost pepper wings from Eddie's bar back on Earth. Those things will make you question your life choices. Razorwing Keats' feathers were standing completely on end. Did he just rate Molten Death a 6 out of 10? On the heat scale, Jake clarified helpfully. The flavor's not bad, but it needs more complexity. Maybe some lime juice? And definitely ice. Gork slowly removed his protective gear with the mechanical movements of someone whose worldview had just been completely shattered. In 3 centuries of bartending, Across dozens of star systems and hundreds of species, he had never seen anything like this. "Would you like another?" he asked weakly. "Sure, but can you make it colder this time?" What happened next could only be described as cultural education gone horribly wrong. Jake, still completely oblivious to the cosmic significance of what he'd just done, decided to explain human drinking culture to his increasingly horrified audience. "See, the thing about humans," Jake said, leaning casually against the bar while Gorks frantically tried to process ice cubes without triggering a thermal shock explosion, is that we kind of evolved eating poison. Vex had managed to regain his composure enough to approach the bar, though he maintained what he considered a safe distance of about 10 feet. "Poison?" "What?" "Oh yeah, capsaicin, alcohol, caffeine, theobromine, half the stuff we consume for fun would kill most species." Jake accepted his second Molten Death, now properly chilled, and took an appreciative sip. "Much better. You know, back on Earth we have entire competitions based on who can eat the most dangerous food." Commander Blurp rippled with what might have been fascination or terror. "You compete to see who can consume the most lethal substances?" "Absolutely. Hot wing contests, beer chugging, espresso shots, good times." Jake's expression grew nostalgic. "There's this place in New Mexico that serves something called Satan's Revenge. It's basically concentrated liquid fire with a side of regret. The waiver you have to sign is longer than most peace treaties." Razorwing Keats' talons were scraping nervously against the floor. "And humans do this for entertainment?" "Well, that and bragging rights. Nothing says I'm tougher than you like being able to drink something that makes your ancestors weep." Jake gestured to Gorks. "Speaking of which, what else have you got back there? I'm curious about your selection." Gorks's hands shook as he gestured to his liquor collection. "We have neutron star whiskey, bottled at the event horizon of a black hole. One drop has been known to cause temporal displacement." "Sounds interesting. How about some of that Earth stuff I brought?" Jake reached into his cargo pocket and pulled out a small metal flask. "This is grain alcohol from Kentucky, 190 proof." The collective intake of breath was audible. "And this," Jake continued, producing a small bottle, "is extract from Carolina Reaper peppers. We use it to flavor food." He unscrewed the cap, and the smell that escaped caused 3 patrons to immediately evacuate the building. Vex's warrior composure finally cracked. "That's a chemical weapon." "No, chemical weapons are illegal. This is a condiment." Jake added a few drops to his Molten Death and took another sip. "Perfect." "Me." Commander Blurp had retreated to the far corner of the bar and was communicating with what appeared to be emergency services. "Yes, I need a hazmat team at the Galactic Bar and Grill." "No, it's not another Molten Death incident. It's worse. Much worse." Jake looked around at the increasingly empty bar with growing confusion. "Did I say something wrong? I was just trying to be friendly." Gorks, who had been steadily backing away throughout Jake's casual demonstration of human dietary tolerance, finally spoke up. "Friend, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We thought humans were, well, we thought you were the soft species. The ones who needed environmental suits just to survive in standard atmosphere." "Oh, that's just safety regulations," Jake waved dismissively. "Lawyers, you know. We can actually handle a pretty wide range of conditions. Earth's kind of a hostile environment when you think about it. Radiation from our sun, toxic atmosphere for most species, regular asteroid impacts, tectonic instability, it builds character." What started as cultural exchange quickly devolved into the most one-sided competition in galactic history. The aliens, their pride wounded by Jake's casual dismissal of their most feared beverage, decided to prove that they weren't complete weaklings. This was a mistake of epic proportions. "Right," announced Vex, puffing out his chest in a display that would have been intimidating to anyone who hadn't just watched Jake treat liquid death like a mild summer refreshment. If the human can handle molten death, then surely we can handle some of his earth beverages. Jake looked genuinely concerned for the first time since entering the bar. I don't think that's a good idea. Some of this stuff is pretty intense. Nonsense, declared Commander Blurp, oozing forward with determination. How dangerous could your primitive earth concoctions possibly be? Famous last words, as they say. Jake reluctantly agreed to serve as bartender, starting with what he considered the mildest option, coffee. Not even espresso, just regular truck stop coffee that had been sitting on a warmer for about 6 hours. Vex went first. The mighty warrior, veteran of countless battles, took one sip and immediately began convulsing. His 7-foot frame hit the floor with a crash that shook the entire station. Medic. Someone screamed. Commander Blurp, undeterred by his companion's immediate hospitalization, decided to try the grain alcohol. He lasted exactly 2.3 seconds before his gelatinous form began literally dissolving. The emergency containment foam deployed automatically. Razor-Wing Keat, showing the kind of stubborn pride that had made her species famous across the galaxy, insisted on trying what Jake described as mild salsa. The screaming could be heard 3 sectors away. This is insane, Jake muttered, watching medical teams cart away another casualty. It's just pace mild. My grandmother puts this on scrambled eggs. Word of the incident spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Soon, Mare. Jake had a crowd of spectators maintaining what they optimistically called a safe distance while placing increasingly ridiculous bets on the survival rates of various alien and species exposed to human-grade consumables. The diplomatic corps of 3 different star systems had filed formal complaints with the Galactic Safety Commission. The hazmat teams were working overtime. Someone had started selling protective equipment outside the bar at premium prices. And Jake just sat there, sipping his perfectly normal coffee, looking like the most dangerous biological weapon in known space. I'm starting to think, he said to Gorks, who was now serving customers while wearing full environmental protection gear, that you guys might have some dietary restrictions I wasn't aware of. Gorks's voice was muffled by his breathing apparatus. Perhaps we should have mentioned that what you consider food registers as industrial solvent on most of our biological scanners. The latest casualty was being wheeled away on a stretcher after attempting to match Jake's casual consumption of what Earth humans called orange juice. The citric acid had apparently triggered an allergic reaction that caused temporary paralysis and what the medical team described as aggressive vitamin C poisoning. Orange juice, Jake said sadly, watching the medical team disappear around a corner. It's not even fresh squeezed. It's from concentrate. 3 weeks later, Jake found himself the proud owner of what was now known throughout the galaxy as Murphy's Human Cantina. Enter at your own risk. Gorks had fled to a quiet monastery on a peaceful agricultural world, claiming he needed time to reassess his relationship with beverages and reality in general. The bar's new reputation preceded it across star systems. Hardened criminals would cross the street to avoid walking past the entrance. The Galactic Insurance Commission had reclassified the establishment as a biological hazard zone and tripled the premiums. Tour groups would point it out from the safety of armored shuttles. Jake had tried to rebrand it as a friendly neighborhood joint, but the damage was done. The sign outside now read, Murphy's Human Cantina, serving Earth-style refreshments to those brave enough to face them. Medical waiver required. Next of kin notification recommended. He'd kept the original Molten Death display case, though now it served as more of a historical curiosity than a serious beverage option. Most customers preferred to point at it from a distance while whispering stories about the legendary human who drank it like fruit juice. The irony wasn't lost on Jake that he'd somehow become the galaxy's most feared bartender while serving what he considered completely normal refreshments. His biggest sellers were items he'd originally brought as personal supplies, instant coffee, sports drinks, and something called mild buffalo sauce that required customers to sign a comprehensive liability waiver. "I just don't understand it," Jake said to his only regular customer, a maintenance android who was immune to biological hazards. "Back home, my nephew drinks this stuff straight from the bottle." He held up a container of what his customers called liquid terror, but what Earth manufacturers labeled as orange mango energy drink, now with extra vitamin C. The android's optical sensors focused on the container with what might have been mechanical sympathy. "Perhaps, Captain Murphy, the issue is not with your beverages, but with the biological limitations of organic life forms who did not evolve in what the Galactic survey classifies as a definitely going to kill you environment." Jake considered this while preparing his latest creation, a mild fruit smoothie that had already caused the evacuation of 2 adjacent businesses. "Maybe. But you know what really gets me?" "What's that, sir?" Jake gestured sadly at his empty bar, where hazmat warning signs outnumbered customers by roughly 50 to 1. "I still can't find a decent cup of coffee anywhere in this galaxy. Everything tastes like it was filtered through synthetic flavor compounds and artificial enthusiasm." Outside, a group of tourists pressed their faces against the reinforced viewing window, pointing excitedly at Jake as he went about his normal routine of preparing what the rest of the galaxy considered weapons-grade consumables. "And that," Jake continued, adding ice cubes to what his menu optimistically called Earth's mildest beverage, but what emergency services had classified as citrus-based biological warfare, "is the real tragedy here." The android's optical sensors dimmed slightly, which Jake had learned was its equivalent of a sympathetic nod. Outside, betting pools were already forming around whether anyone would be brave enough to try today's special chocolate milk. Jake Murphy, accidental legend of the galaxy, just wanted a normal drink in a normal bar. Instead, he'd become the proprietor of the universe's most terrifying establishment, serving beverages that could hospitalize entire species while he remained completely baffled by his reputation. Such is life among the stars, where one being's refreshing beverage is another being's existential crisis. And somewhere in the peaceful gardens of Tranquilia Prime, Gorks was learning to appreciate the simple pleasure of plain water and trying very hard not to think about humans or their terrifying concept of mild flavoring. The galaxy would never be the same, and Jake still couldn't figure out why everyone was being so dramatic about orange juice.